Welcome back, fifth graders. This is Mr. Mace, and we are going to continue our discussion about equivalent fractions. In our previous lesson, we used a lot of visuals to help prove why a fraction might be equivalent to another fraction or equal to another fraction. We used a lot of number lines, we used some circles, we used some pizza discussions to help you visualize and understand why if I eat half of a pizza, it is the same thing as eating 2/4 of a pizza or 3/6 of a pizza, and how those fractions actually mean the same part of a whole. Today we're going to try to get you out of the visual side of things and really try to bring it into the number sense and trying to get you to identify number patterns and get you to use maybe some different tools to help you understand which fractions might be equivalent or how you can determine if a fraction is equivalent to another fraction. Now at the top of page 9 here in your workbook, and this would be a great idea for you if you wanted to follow along in your textbook, you should see a couple of multiplication charts. And on that multiplication chart, you should see that there are some lines here that have been highlighted. The multiplication chart is actually a really good tool for multiple things in math. Obviously, to help you with your multiplication facts and your division facts, but here we are going to actually use it to help us see number patterns and help us to determine fractions that are equivalent to one another. Because if we follow the same line all the way across, those two things will continue to be treated equally all the way across the multiplication chart. So as we look at the first chart here, I'll mark it chart A. And this one will be chart B. As we look at chart A, we are looking at a chart that has the 3 and the 5 highlighted. And if you look at the beginning of this equivalent fraction chain, you can see that we are looking for the equivalent fraction chain of 3/5. Okay, so that means that the 3 is our numerator and the 5 is our denominator. Again, the two parts of the fraction, numerators and denominators, numerator on top, denominator on the bottom. So we find that first fraction right here. If I circle these two numbers, now obviously there's a 4 in between there, but we are looking at the highlighted lines or the darkened lines here. And you can see that 3/5 is the fraction we're starting with. Well, if you look at the fraction chain, the next equivalent fraction we might have, if we multiply the 3 and the 5 both by 2, we get to 6/10. And if we look up here and we use this multiplication symbol right here, we multiply it by 2, we again are looking at 6/10. Okay, you should start to see a pattern here. Now if I multiplied that 3/5 by 3, so starting here and now multiply it by 3, I come down here and I see my equivalent fraction of 9/15, and so on and so forth. So if you are really struggling with, is this a equivalent fraction? Is this fraction equal to another one? If you have a multiplication chart handy, which all of us do, both in our math expressions books, our math workbooks, and in your planner, guys, in the back of your planner. And again, I don't have the number page off the top of my head, but I know that there is a really nice multiplication chart in the back of those planners. So please take advantage of that. So we're going to fill out just a couple of chains here just to get us thinking about this and using the multiplication chart that is up above here. So I'm going to erase what I've got and start back over. We again now want to trying to get away from the ones that shaded in already, and I'm going to give you a couple new lines. So it looks like we want to start with 4 and 9. Now it's asking you to color it in. So if at home you want to be coloring it in, or here in class you want to be coloring it in, I've got no problem with that if you've got something available to you. I'm just going to draw an arrow to show us that this is the line that we are looking at for the numerator, and this is the line we are looking at for the denominator right here. Numerator is 4, the denominator is 9. So our first fraction is 4/9, which means then the next one would be, as we follow along here, one spot here, one spot here, we should be looking at 8/18. We've multiplied both the top and the bottom by 2, so if you're using the math side of things, you can just say, yep, I multiplied 4 by 2, I multiplied 9 by 2, and 8/18 is our answer. Or I can look at my multiplication chart and see what is the next number in each order. Same thing for the next one. If I bump one more over, now I'm multiplying that 4 by 3 and that 9 by 3, I can see that my next number in that chain is 12/27. One more over, 16/36. And I can easily use this multiplication chart to help me work my way through this chain of numbers. And I'm going to stop right there just for the sake of time. You can definitely complete the rest of that if you want, just to drive that point home. I hope that makes sense to you. I hope that's starting to resonate with you and starting to realize that, boy, this is a really nice tool to help me find equivalent fractions. Okay? Let's look at the one down below it. Now it's saying 3/8. Okay, so I'm going to jump to the next chart over here, and I'm going to change colors just so we're not super confused. I'm going to change to green. Okay, this time we're using the 3 as our numerator and the 8 as our denominator. But nothing has changed. It's still just a fraction. It's still the same as what we've been working with before. So if we've got a 3 as a numerator, 8 as the denominator, it starts with that. And then we go to the next row. 3 times 2 is 6. 8 times 2 is 16. So 6/16 is the next one in that order. And then we're dealing with 9/24. And then we're dealing with 12/32. Missing my spot on the line there. And so on and so forth. So again, guys, the patterns, huge when we're talking about multiplication charts and equivalent fractions moving forward. Okay, so looking for that number relationship. We started this process a little bit yesterday when we started dealing with those proportions and saying, well, if somebody makes 2/3 of their free throws, but they shoot 12 free throws, we did that on yesterday's practice, okay? So those are the kinds of things we want you to be thinking about moving forward, all right? So now, let's put this into some practice here. And again, visual again, right? But we're going to try to use our number sense much more so because they're not showing us specifically how it's changing. They're just showing us that the two things are equal. All right, so they're saying use these fraction bars to find equivalent fractions for 3/4. So I'm going to write 3/4 along the side here personally. I know we've got the extra spaces here, but I like to write it down myself. They want us to figure out how many eighths that would equal. Okay, so this is the problem we want to try to solve. We, in all honesty, are really looking for what is the missing numerator on that side. How many eighths is going to be equal to 3/4, excuse me. Okay, so you can see that this first bar is already shaded in for us. 1, 2, 3 out of 4 shaded in. We need to get the second bar to be eighths. Well, how am I going to make a 4 into an 8? I'm going to multiply it by 2, or I'm going to make double the amount of pieces. So if I do that by cutting each of these in half and making them now have 8 pieces equally instead of just 4. Okay, and if I do that, then I look and say I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 eighths. Okay, and it means I multiplied both the 3 by 2 and the 4 by 2 to get to 6/8. So here's how I would do it so I don't have to draw a picture each time. I simply look at this ratio or this proportion here and I say, how did I get from that 4 to that 8? The one that I have the 2 numbers on is where I want to be thinking and looking for that relationship. 1, I know the number got bigger. That means I need to multiply. Because remember that we can also divide and make those numbers smaller. We can simplify those fractions by dividing it. But in this case, we know 3/4 gets larger. Those numbers are going to get bigger to go to something in the eighths. Now, what did I multiply by it? I said I multiplied it by 2, so here it is. So 4 times 2 is 8. When dealing with fractions, we've got to treat things equally. We got to make the fraction equal. So if I multiply by 2 on the bottom, I have to also multiply by 2 on the top. So 3 times 2 is 6. So the question mark in this case equals 6, and that is why I wrote 6/8 there. Okay. Now, I'm not even going to use the fraction bar on this next one. I'm simply going to use the proportion and the ratio that I have here. If you guys want to use your planner to help you with that skill, I've got no problem with that as well. I just would like to get us away from having to draw a picture of a fraction bar or a number line or circles to help us find equivalent fractions. I would love us to start becoming more comfortable using just numbers or just a multiplication chart and tool to help us. So we still start with 3/4, and we're trying to figure out which fraction with a 12 in the bottom is going to help us or be equivalent, excuse me, to 3/4. So I'm looking at this relationship here. How did I get from 4 to 12? Okay, again, the number got bigger, which tells me it's multiplication, which means I'm going to be multiplying by something. 4 times what gets me to 12? That should be a 3. So then I have to do the same thing on the top. 3 times 3 equals 9. And so my empty space here, my missing numerator, 9/12, is equal or equivalent to 3/4. Now, as we progress throughout the year here, we're going to run into this gentleman quite a bit. It's Puzzled Penguin is his name, and he makes some pretty silly mistakes, or sometimes he just makes mistakes that 5th graders often and commonly make. So in this situation, he says, "Dear math students, I tried to find a fraction equivalent to 5/6. I multiplied the denominator by 2 to make the smaller unit fractions. This can't be right because 5/6 is almost 1, and 5/12 is less than a half. So they can't be equal. Why doesn't my method work?" Okay, so as we look at his problem, and they lay it out for us right here, they're showing us kind of what happens here. And if you look at what I did with my problem right up here, it should be a pretty good indication of what Puzzled Penguin did wrong. Okay, he's trying to find an equivalent or equal fraction, but he didn't treat the numerator and the denominator equally. He multiplied by the 6 on the bottom, but he didn't do anything to the top. So to be equal or equivalent, he would have also had to have multiplied the top by 2 as well. All right. Okay, thank you very much for paying attention here. Hopefully at this point, 5th graders, equivalent fractions are starting to make a little bit more sense. We have another exit ticket or an ending assignment that hopefully you'll understand. Again, if you don't do well on it the first time, you can ask your teacher some more questions. You can come back and watch the video. You can retake it, okay? You can do that over again to help you understand what it is you're doing wrong. But please, please, please ask questions if there is something you are not getting. All right. Thank you very much, 5th graders, and have a great day.